program. So I help with student recruiting and communication with current and prospective students, as well as working with our faculty and adjuncts in the program, and try to find great internship opportunities for our current students, and do professional development and social events for our current students. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Brandy. Haley?
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Pressi. I'm the Registrar and Collections Manager at the Manetti Shrem Museum here on the Davis campus. I have essentially two roles here. One is the registrar. I work on exhibitions. So I do basically everything to make an exhibition happen after the curator comes up with a checklist. So I coordinate shipping, packing, insurance, loan agreements, oversee installation and deinstallation in the gallery. And as the collection manager, I also do paperwork to accession gifts and purchases into our collection. And then I oversee the long-term preservation and care of all of the works in our collection. So that involves cataloging objects, creating long-term storage solutions, working with conservators and other contract folks to make sure our collection, exists in a way that the public can enjoy it for decades to come.
Thank you, Haley. Juliet?
Hi, everyone. My name is Juliet Hook, and I'm the collections manager of invertebrate paleontology for the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. And it's best to think of collections managers at natural history museums somewhat like librarians, but you're not managing books, you're managing fossils. So we have about 7 million fossils in our collection from all over the world, ranging from all sorts of different time periods. I think some of the oldest material we have is around 500 million years old, going up to 10,000 years old. And so it's my job, kind of twofold. The first is to protect and preserve this material. So I'm doing this process you may have heard of called curation, where you're identifying the fossils, you're cataloging them, labeling them, putting them in a database, imaging them, all sorts of things. I myself am not involved in active research. If that's something you're interested in, you'd be looking for a curator position. The goal of my job is to facilitate others' research. So I do a lot of different paperwork as well, choosing fossils for other folks to study and such. And then the next part of my job is really to share what we do. So I do a lot of public outreach, and it's important as a steward of our collection to make it accessible to others, and not just other researchers, but to the public as well. So that's a huge component of my position.
Thank you, Juliet. Alyssa?
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, my computer is acting funny, so I apologize. I'm the senior museum scientist for anthropology. I'm also the collections manager, jack of all trades. We are a staff of one. So I handle all registration, curation, outreach, internship, and volunteership duties, intake, outtake, and that sort of thing for the museum, for the Department of Anthropology.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. So now I'd like to open the floor to all of you guys, all you students. If you write a question in the chat, I'll try and read it off for our panelists, but you can also just hop in when you feel comfortable with any of your questions. And if nobody can think of any questions, I do have a list prepared. So please don't feel pressured, but feel a little pressured. So Caroline Callan, I hope I pronounced that right, asked what degrees does everybody have?
I'd love to jump in and answer this question. So I'm actually an alum of Davis. I graduated in 2017 with a Bachelor's of Science in Evolutionary Anthropology and a minor in Communication. Because the goal of my position is not to do active research, I don't need a PhD for this role. Although if you want to be a curator, you will need to go on and go to graduate school. That being said, a lot of collections managers do end up having PhDs and also work to do research as well, but that's not the focus of the position. It kind of just depends on the institution and the curator you're working with, what kind of roles that they would like you to have. And that somewhat determines your background. So you don't need to have been to graduate school, but some have been as well.
Thank you, Juliet. Does anybody else have anything to say on that, or?
I can go second. So I started working in the museum with a Bachelor's of Arts from UC Davis, and I began as an intern and then worked my way into the position. And then I continued with coursework and got a degree with my Master's in Arts in Anthropology with an emphasis in archaeology.
Very cool, thank you. All right. Oh, sorry, Haley.
Sorry. I have a BA in art history. I'm also a UC grad, but from UCLA. And I picked registration as a field I wanted to go into because I specifically didn't want to have to go to grad school. So I didn't want to pursue a PhD to get a curator position or go into academia. And now that I've been working in this field for 7 or 8 years now, it's about 50-50 with registrars I've encountered in art museums who have a master's, whether that's in museum studies, in library science or information studies, or in art history. So I would say, in my experience, it's not necessary to have that master's degree. With the work I've done, experience is the biggest way to help get your foot in the door. So internships, volunteering, all of that, I feel like helps a little bit more than having a master's degree.
All right, that's really good to know, especially for those of us that are really looking forward to graduation and ending our essays. All right, Andrew asked, how did you get started doing museum work? I suppose that goes with a little bit of what you were just saying, Haley, with the internship and what Elizabeth was saying about internships. But does anybody else have, why did you choose to be in a museum?
I grew up going to, so I actually was born and raised in Los Angeles. So I grew up going to the museum and I absolutely love natural history museums. When I went to Davis, I believe my senior year, there was a museum internship course that you could take. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to apply because I already had commitments outside in another organization. I felt like I wasn't able to dedicate the time. But all throughout that year, I had a lot of different internships that I pursued with the graduate students actually, and asking if I could help out with any of their work. So that was really beneficial for me. But the summer, my senior year summer, I ended up interning with the UC Davis Museum. I actually worked a little bit with Liz, and that was really just a start where I knew that I wanted to be doing this, and especially zooarchaeology. That's when I learned I actually wanted to be working with animals. And so that's kind of why I took that transition into paleontology and geology.
That's really cool. Thank you, Juliet. Anybody? No? All right, next question.
I can jump in really quick. So I actually didn't know I wanted to be in museum work when I started. One of the big things that somebody, actually a professor who was retiring, echoed to our class over and over again is get out there and get experience, get internships, sign up for internships, doing whatever it is, because you won't know that you absolutely adore a line of work until you really start trying and start getting your feet wet. And so that's what I did. I started internships and all sorts of things, and volunteerships with communities and that sort of thing too. And one of the internships I did was with the museum that I'm working with right now, and I fell in love with it. And it was one of those things that I really woke up every day knowing that that's what I wanted to do, that I was excited about going to the internship that day. And it was one of those things that as soon as it happened, as soon as I felt that desire to just keep coming and keep coming, I didn't realize that that's actually what I wanted to do. I think once it happens with all the experiences that you sign up for, then you realize, oh, this is actually the line of work I want to be in. It's important to get out there. That's what I'm trying to say.
What about you, Haley? How'd you get started in museums?
I also had an internship my final year of college at UCLA. I got an internship in the registrar's department at the Hammer Museum, which is a contemporary art museum part of UCLA. So when I was there, I got the behind the scenes look. I got to see exhibition installs. I got to learn how to handle art and pull prints from the collection out to do class visits. So the first day I got to pull a print out, it was a Dept print. And I remember thinking, like, this is what I'm studying art history for. So that was a really exciting moment. And I just really like the behind the scenes nature. I think Juliet said earlier, it's kind of like being the librarian of the museum. So you know all the little nooks and crannies of the collection, you know, some of the secrets back there. So it was super critical to getting my start. And by the end of my internship, someone had left the museum, so there was an opening. And that was my first actual job after graduation. So having those connections with that department and having a year of experience at that point really helped make me a good candidate to work at that museum for a few years.
So to jump off that, we have another question asking about how you chose the institution that you work at. It sounds like you guys mostly chose based on you got an internship there and you just loved it and never left. But what would you say about that?
I can expand on my answer. Yeah, I got the internship turned into a full-time job, which I was really excited about because I was a little scared about entering the job market, looking for something with a degree in the humanities, and museums are kind of a small field to break into. So that was awesome. And I loved my time at the museum. It was a fantastic, I think I spent 4 years there. So it was a really great experience learning as much as I could about different aspects of registration. And then after that, once you have a few years under your belt, you can really decide what other institutions you want to work at, or if you want to pivot to a slightly different role in museums or outside of museums even.
I actually started working at the Natural History Museum of LA about 5 years ago, part-time on grant funding. So a lot of these positions that you're looking for, the goal most of the time for grant funding is to hire an emerging professional and train them within the field. And so out of college, a lot of you will be your experiences will be directly applicable to those sorts of positions. And that's really amazing because you get wonderful training from folks that have worked at these institutions for decades and know a lot of that institutional history and do the day-to-day job. So you're kind of getting your feet wet and getting to experience it. And while I worked at my position part-time, I also ended up applying for a position in the UCLA Meteorite Collection, which is in their Earth, Planetary, and Space Sciences department. So I worked there as a curatorial assistant and then also became a collections manager. So for the past 3.5 years, I actually had both these positions part-time, an assistant collections manager and a collections manager at 2 separate institutions. To find permanent funding at museums can be competitive, but so are a lot of things in life. So don't make that a deterrent. These positions, you end up getting them, they're permanent, which is amazing, but it can be a little bit harder to get your foot in the door. So looking for museums that are applying for this, that have this grant funding and are looking for folks to fill these roles and to learn, that's really the best way to get out there and to try it out.
So is there specific, you see on the museum's website, we're hiring for this word or this grant?
Sometimes here's the thing about hiring, and everyone uses this different company to post about their different positions, and they have different legal requirements of how they advertise that to different people. So it's a little bit complicated. And I'd also say a lot of museums are moving towards this, but it's different than other professions in that everything is posted to LinkedIn and, it's all well connected. Sometimes really the best thing to do is to either join a professional society and student memberships are a lot cheaper. So that's amazing. These professional societies, they'll have these listservs and people will send in these job applications saying like, oh, we're hiring for this. That information is also available on museum websites under their career page as well. But if you want a one-stop shop, it can be easier to do it versus within this professional society. And that's also great because you can take the opportunity to join any of these committees and get to meet people and learn from people. And that also helps you get your foot in the door. And a lot of the work now is virtual. So you don't need to be going in person. You can just be helping out and volunteering online.
Thank you, Juliet. That was very informative. Helpful is the word I was looking for there. Sorry. All right, before I stumble over any more of my words, let's look for another question. Arthur asks, what are the most useful general degrees to get into curation? I think you guys are all collections managers rather than curators. But Brandy, maybe you want to jump in here and talk about your program?
Sure. So we're a master's program, and like it was mentioned earlier, curatorial positions are typically those at the PhD level. You are seeing some small museums that might hire curators at the master's level, but it still really is a predominantly PhD-led area of the field. And in that, you want your subject matter expertise, whether that's art history or anthropology, history, paleontology, geology, ecology and evolutionary biology. Those are really like your subject experts. So what we have seen is students will get a master's degree in museum studies because museum studies, for the most part, is a terminal master's degree. There are a couple of programs that might offer very specific PhDs that are maybe geared towards arts administration, for instance. But in general, museum studies is a master's degree. And then if they want to go on for curatorial positions, they'll apply to PhD programs back in their field of expertise. So that's what we've seen with our students for sure. But having that kind of general knowledge of the museum field, but that theoretical foundational knowledge, as well as the hands-on skills that you would get in collections management or exhibit design and development or public education, things like that, are really handy if museums are a career path that you're really interested in.
All right, that makes sense.
I kind of just want to interject because there's a question that was just asked that I think is very kind of aligned with this, that Shannon is asking about, is it difficult to find a position with only an undergrad degree? And yeah, I think that's probably on a lot of people's minds. Can I find something entry level with a bachelor's only? So I wanted to just interject because that was just asked, and I think that, it kind of aligns with what we're discussing. So
I'd love to answer that if I can. So I've had a lot of students who have gone on and gotten jobs straight out of getting their bachelor's. Mind you, our particular museum is anthropology based, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're limited to only working in an anthropology museum. I had one student in particular whose desire was to get a job with a Smithsonian hanging coats, taking coats at the front door. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective. And I asked her, why is this your dream job? And she said, not because I want to collect coats, not because I want to hang coats, but because I want to gain an appreciation and an understanding for how museums operate. I want to gain an appreciation for the overall operations of the institution, of the museum that I'm working for. I think that's something to really keep in mind when you're going out there looking for museum jobs, is not to have the end goal or the first goal being getting the highest job possible. Don't be afraid to start from the very bottom. It's very important to gain that understanding of how museums operate, and having a bachelor's is critical, I think, for moving and having the ability to move within the museum. But starting from the ground up it's actually very useful in the long run, and you can do that with a bachelor's.
I'll also add on to that and say there are a variety of positions you can have at a museum. So I work within our research and collections framework in one of our paleontology departments. There are a range of jobs you can have within paleontology, but in the Greater Museum, we also have other departments like community science, or we have museum educators that are there on the floor teaching folks how to do this. We have people that are focused on public outreach and working with community organizers to share science information and to make it accessible. So there are a lot of different roles that you can have at a museum. So to keep that in mind as well, you can have the opportunity to try out a couple different things, and that widens the amount of jobs that you have the opportunity to apply to.
And I will say, and full disclaimer, obviously I'm with a master's degree program, so, put out there in neon lights. I do see in the different job boards that I get in my, the listservs and things like that, the vast majority are wanting at least a master's degree. And I will say that pay is something that this field, it's not one that you go into for the money right off the bat, for sure. And I think being very, very explicit about that, because obviously with a bachelor's degree, you might be accruing some student debt already. And if you go to graduate school for either a master's or a PhD, chances are you'll have a little bit more debt to add on to that. So just understanding the economics of the field that you're interested in going into, I think is important, because like I said, we are seeing in most of the position descriptions I see, they do want a master's degree, so advanced education, and the salaries are fairly low starting out for a lot of positions. I'm talking like the 30s and 40s. So just eyes wide open. I think it's a great field, but it's definitely one that you're not going to be eating bonbons on your couch and in your second vacation home, for sure.
Speaking of jobs in the industry, we have a question about museum technicians. My own question is, what is a museum technician? And then they want to know, what are the steps to become a museum technician?
It's an interesting question, and I will just speak to the experience that I've had, but maybe others in this call feel differently. For us, it's just kind of one of the terms that you would use for someone that's working within the field. And sometimes when you're advertising your positions, you're advertising them at different pay scales, and museum technician will usually be where you're starting in. That's sometimes what the terminology might be. But a museum technician could have all the positions that we have. It just depends on what the institution is. That's a bit of a difficult name to work with, I guess. But I'll leave that up to my colleagues here to speak on that.
I just want to add that for the University of California system, a museum technician is referred to as a museum preparator. And so it has different names throughout the industry. And I think Juliet kind of speaks to it. It's more people who work in or work with museum management, curation standards, that sort of thing, curatorial duties. So technician is a word that's more loose to the actual description of what you do. And it could be preparator, it could be technician, it could be custodian is another word that I see often as well.
I think that's helpful you're mentioning that, Elizabeth, because I think it is kind of knowing these different terms and searching for jobs, because, you know, one institution may call it this and another may call it this, but it's really the same work, just a slightly different term being used. So I think, yeah, it's doing the research of what exact terms. Are there certain terms that are more like indicating entry level? I know like in state or federal jobs, there's like certain ways to search for certain like ranges of jobs that are meant for more entry level. Is there something like that in the museum world, or not really? Like different terms mean something's more entry level versus something is maybe needing a more advanced degree.
In my experience, it's different institution to institution. You kind of have to read the job description and see what level of experience they're looking for. I've often seen, you know, collections manager with a prefix of assistant collections manager or assistant registrar, and that would denote that you're earlier in your career than, say, a regular collections manager or a senior collections manager. Sometimes the positions will also be called collection technicians, art handlers. In the UK, I've seen some of these positions called just keepers. So you are the keeper of the collection out there. So you just have to get creative and click on everything you see and read through it and see if those requirements kind of match with what you're looking to do.
In the internship that I run, we spend a lot of time looking for jobs, and I normally help people with their resumes and with their CVs and their applications and things like that. And oftentimes the keywords that I always tell them to look for are museum, because it's either a museum this or a museum that, or collections, collections this or collections that. Keeper's a new one. I haven't heard that one, but generally museum and collections get a lot of listings when you just do the search. This hasn't come up, but I think it's semi-related, is when you're starting your search to work in museums, don't limit yourself to actually working in a museum. There are museum related fields such as art handlers. I think that's something that's important to kind of keep in mind, that they're related, and it's a very good foot in the door to getting a museum career or to beginning your museum career. I have some folks who are art handlers or art packers that work for museum specialized fields and actually prepare collections for like the De Young or for the SF MoMA and things like that. And they're not particularly in museums, but museum related fields.
Speaking of jobs in museums, we have a question. Which job in a museum allows you to touch the objects and artifacts and prepare them for display?
I'll speak on this. So for our Natural History Museum, there are a couple different positions that will allow you to do that. So I guess I'm talking a little bit more like paleontology, archaeology focused, but the collections managers, you're helping pick out what the material might be, like the physical object. That being said, we also have you have designers, you have people that work on the exhibits team, on the fabrication team. They're also handling these objects as well. And we have the registrars handling these objects. So everyone has the opportunity to do it. The designers, or people working in exhibits or in fabrication they might come up with these greater themes and say, you know your collection the best. Can you pull some specimens that speak to this theme? So I will go pull the specimens, and then they will build these housings for them for display, or others will be using them and imaging them for public outreach. So there's a bunch of different things that you can do with the fossils. So a lot of different people are helping within these projects. It's not just one role. But if you want to be the person that is choosing the objects, that's usually like the collections manager or the curator, but everybody gets to work on an exhibit, I would say is the best way to phrase that.
Another question about specific museum jobs is how do you get into preservation work?
I can kind of speak to this. I have a couple of students who are very interested in getting into preservation work. I'd say chemistry, having a knowledge of chemistry, because a lot of times conservation work, conservation or preservation, I'm sorry, there's two different things, but conservators are a dime a dozen. They're not dime a dozen. They're difficult to find. It's a very good field to get into, especially if you are interested in chemistry, because there will always be a demand for them. But to have a working knowledge of the chemistry and the chemical buildup and the makeup of the actual artifact is very helpful. And there's not a lot of people who have that knowledge on their belt.
And I will say too, at KU, some of our students are interested in that as well, from more of like an architectural side. So the KU School of Architecture has a historic preservation graduate certificate that students can take. It's basically a graduate level minor or concentration. But our students, because our curriculum is so flexible and interdisciplinarity is really the key, they can fold those courses into their museum studies degree and have two different credentials. So they'll have a master's degree and a graduate certificate when they're done. So that's another option too. But we also have a conservation class as part of our collections management track. And it's taught by the head conservator for the KU libraries. And they have this really amazing, like, state-of-the-art lab where they do all sorts of chemical washes, and they have freezers to, suspend mold growth, and they'll teach you how to house things properly to where it's not harming the objects that you're working with, depending on the type of material that they're made from. And it's incredibly hands-on, but conservatorship, like Elizabeth said, they are really, really important folks. And it's a very practically based job too. I mean, most of your museum work is, but that one is definitely super hands-on and practical.
Speaking of your program, Brandy, we have a question about how you find internships and other groups of people like to network with at the undergraduate, but also at the graduate level.
So internships are really important, like we've been talking already, and that's also a requirement of our program. Every student has to have at least 250 hours of internship hours, and that could be anywhere in the world at any accredited museum. But we do not do specific placements for students in internships, but we do have a listserv that we send to our students a couple of times a week. And one of the things that we add in there are open internships across the country. I do not list any unpaid internships. Unpaid internships are still a thing, unfortunately, in the field, but we really try to fight for our students to get paid because you are doing professional work. So we want you to get paid for that. So we subscribe to other listservs to where I can pull those from. We also are members of several industry associations that have job and internship listings. Some folks will send those directly to us and email, say, hey, we've got this. Can you please share it with your students? And then social media. Social media is another opportunity for you to really kind of get a feel for the trends and the issues that are going on in the field. I follow quite several hundred different museums and professionals on Twitter for our program, and that's been really, really essential to me learning more about the field. And then, like they were saying earlier, go to the museum's websites. You know, if there's a specific museum that you're interested in working for or with, you know, definitely try their websites. We've also had students who are interested in designing their own internship. They didn't see an internship opportunity listed anywhere on the museum that they were interested in working with. And so they've reached out to that institution and said, hey, you know, here's who I am. I'm a master's student at KU. I'd like to really work with you on XYZ for an internship. Do you think this would be a possibility? And obviously that's a long shot, and I can't say that that's going to work for everybody, but that student did get an internship with the institution doing exactly what they were hoping to do. So there's lots of ways to find out about the internships, and we do try really hard to share boatloads every week. And we tend to find more opportunities available in the summertime than during the school year. And those will be more of your 30 to 40 hour a week opportunities. So you'll get more of that full-time work experience. They're usually 8 to 12 weeks, usually sitting around 10 weeks for those. And that's a good way for our students who want to do an internship elsewhere outside of the Lawrence or Kansas City areas, that if they need to relocate for the summer, that they can do that. I hope that helped answer that question.
Can I also
So-
just
oh.
give a quick shout out to some resources on campus around this question? And so sorry, I'm kind of just interjecting in addition to Nora. I'm the staff advisor in anthropology. For those of you I don't know, I recognize some names, but I know we have folks from art history, museum studies minors, a variety of people here today. So that's who I am, the random person, sometimes interjecting here. But for internships, I highly encourage y'all, if you have not already, to utilize the Career Center on campus, the Internship and Career Center. They, provide generalized help around the internship search. So they're not going to be experts like, say, Elizabeth and other folks here on this panel. I mention Elizabeth because she works on campus, in anthropology, so I know her well. But they can provide insights, about specific things related to museum internships, but the Career Center can help in exploring where you can find those internships in terms of like websites and different professional associations. So I highly encourage people, if you have not already, my computer's running slowly here. I'll put the link in the chat to the folks at the Internship and Career Center who oversee the liberal arts and business area, which includes this world of like museum work. There's 3 advisors there who meet with students who are interested in anything that is not STEM, ag, or pre-health. And so this would fall under their purview for help with that. I also want to give a shout out to the UC Washington program. That is an internship-based program. And I think someone mentioned the Smithsonian. That is an internship that you're not just going to be able to probably apply to on your own. It will be through a program like the UC Washington program that helps. It doesn't place you into an internship. You still have to interview, but they help give students access to internships like all the different Smithsonian museums in DC that you normally wouldn't have access to applying to without having a connection through a program like that. So the UC Washington program, it happens every quarter. They always do info sessions multiple times throughout the quarter. And so I'll put that link in the chat, but that's another great resource of exploring you know, an internship at something as high profile as the Smithsonian, or other museums around DC, and a way to get that experience would be to do the UC Washington program. So those are things on our campus in terms of the museum internship piece as a source of exploration. So, okay,
Kelly, do you think
throwing it
that
back to Nora.
Kelly, do you think that the Career Center on campus has access to any of the listservs that Brandy and the others have been mentioning for museum jobs?
You know, maybe, maybe not, but if links can be put by folks, Haley, Juliet, Elizabeth, if you know, or you can send Nora and I links and we can email it out to the folks who are registered in here today. That would be helpful because again, the ICC folks are generalists overall with the like internship search and may not off the top of their head know, like, this is a great forum to be part of. This is a great, you know, listserv to be part of. So if the folks here today, you know, off the top of your head have that info with like a link you could throw in the chat, that would be great.
Yeah, actually, we did have a student asking for any specific recommendations for forums and groups to join. So we would definitely appreciate anything you guys can think of.
Yeah, I'll drop some links in the chat, but I belong to ARCS, that's ARCS, the Association of Registrars and Collection Specialists. They have tiered membership pricing from student to entry level to late career positions, but I think that their open position job posting page is available for free, so I'll drop that link. And also the RCWR, the Registrars Committee Western Region. That's a $15 membership fee, and they often send out weekly emails with job updates, little newsletters, and that's a nice little niche group of registrars in the western part of the United States.
Thank you, Haley. We really appreciate that.
Can I just add something really quick that I wish I knew as an undergraduate, is that these internships are not easy to find. I remember doing the search myself. Don't be afraid to reach out to your professors, to just ask, you know, hey, do you know of any internships, or can I intern for you? Maybe they don't have an internship yet or an internship set up, but maybe they'll think of something, especially if they do work with collections, be it anthropology, be it art, paleontology, anything. Oftentimes that's how internships begin, is because somebody is interested and has spoken up.
So you've heard it here, folks. Bug your professors. No, I'm teasing. Well, not quite teasing, but yeah, you all know what I mean. All right. We have another question from Thomas. Are there places, museums, that have connections to the entertainment industry, i.e., where there is direct relation and contact with people in the industry? So, like, I'm sorry, Thomas, I'm not quite understanding your question. Feel free to hop in here, but like, you want to meet celebrities in museums?
Or maybe there's reference to, and yeah, Thomas, feel free to unmute if you feel comfortable to explain further. Like, are you thinking of a museum that's more outside of the realm of like anthro and art history? And I'm trying to think of like a, you know, like the History of Rock and Roll Museum in Cleveland, Ohio, or something like that. Is that because there's all kinds of museums, right? That, or I know there's one in LA that just opened around, yeah, the entertainment industry. And is that kind of what you're referring to?
He
There
says
are-
oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, you just put that in the chat. Academy Museum in LA. Yep, that's
Mhm.
what I was thinking of.
There's a Grammys museum that just opened up, a Universal Hip Hop Museum that just opened. We just had a student a couple of years ago intern at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. Lots of music related ones. And then there are also museums that they don't land squarely in, you know, anthropology or history or what have you, but they bring in pop culture quite a bit. So yeah, lots of options for those.
Yeah, I think in Seattle, I've been to it. I think it's literally called the Museum of Pop Culture.
Yep.
in Seattle, and it's a great museum.
Yep.
Yeah.
In LA, there are quite a lot that speak to this sort of entertainment industry question. And they're similar to what Brandy said. There's a Grammy Museum. The Academy just opened. The George Lucas Museum of Narrative Art is going to open in 2024. It's actually across the street from the Natural History Museum. So there are a lot of different museums you can work at. As for maybe making connections with people that in the industry, you will get to meet a lot of people, but I wouldn't say, unless you're a very specific role, you're probably not going to be meeting maybe the actors or actresses, but you will be meeting people that work on films. But you might kind of be a step away. It depends what role you have. Usually it's a lot of the social media or the people that are higher up in the administration will be working in connection with the people, and then you will have the object, and then you will be working with the object. So you might, on occasion, you can be a little bit disconnected to the people that you're getting the material from. That's not always the case. But if it's a job that interests you, the George Lucas will be hiring in 2024, and that would be an amazing institution to get to work at.
Well, at the very least, I'm looking forward to one day visiting that museum.
It looks amazing. It's massive. It's crazy. They're building it so quickly.
George Lucas would be a cool place to work at. Sorry, muttering to myself. So we have another question about advice for like the skills you should like highlight in your resume. A lot of the advice like I give people asking me like how, sometimes I get students that come in here and like, what's an anthropology degree good for? And it's always like, you do a lot of these you get a lot of these great skills that you can then apply to however many jobs you can, creatively apply, these buzzwords to. But for museum specific, is there some anthropology or sociology related skills that our students get that we can highlight in job applications?
In my experience, highlighting that you are really open to learning and are a quick learner, I mean, regardless of whatever job you jump into as your first employment after graduating, you're going to have to learn an entirely new system. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending how you look at it, real life is kind of like one big group project. So being able to work in teams, being able to compromise, be flexible, also being able to write well. A lot of my job is spent composing emails or drafting correspondence. So these seem like really basic things, but being able to write, a grammatically correct cover letter to go along with your resume, being able to write a nice follow-up thank you email showing, email etiquette. These are like really good basic skills that can show people you're interviewing with that, you are a good blank slate to start working with to learn more from the institution you're applying to work at.
And I'd echo Haley in saying, the communication skills, both verbal and written, are really important, but technology, I mean, every facet of this field, whether it's in, collections management for the databases that you might be working in, or even in the marketing sector, if you know how to make videos, and this could be technology that you have taken classes on, formal training, or that you've taught yourself how to do. If you've picked up how to make videos on your phone or do podcasts. We have a student who's in our program right now who has an undergrad degree in sport management, which seems like it wouldn't connect. But he went out and worked for a year or two, and he really loves history and wants to work in a sports hall of fame. And so he created his own podcast by himself, learned the tools on his own. And so now he interviews people all over the country for his podcast. And he just found out that he is going to be interning this summer at the National Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And I have to believe that his self-starting is one. And I think that's what Haley's alluding to, is that you're open to starting new things, but also his proactiveness on technology. He's going to be working in the education department, I believe. So they'll definitely use his skills. So things like that you might not think that you have formal training on, but are really important in today's world. I definitely would put that in there.
Echoing Brandy's statement, I write a lot of different abstracts for conferences. I present at these conferences for my own professional development. And that's where I learn a lot of information. I get to meet a lot of colleagues across the world. And so your classes help in that. Don't forget that. And I do a lot of public outreach too. So I'll give presentations to different schools in the Los Angeles Unified School District, presentations to donors, to museum members, a lot of those different things. So anytime you have an opportunity to do public speaking, just to try it out, or to be doing some sorts of scientific writing, that's really helpful, just because it prepares you for it and you can speak to the fact that you have done it already. It's not to say you're an expert in it, but that you've tried it, you do enjoy it, you like it, and you want to learn more. I think no one is looking for any of you to come in being an expert, but they just want to know that you have an interest in it and you're willing to try it out, and to have the opportunity to show that you've done it in whatever way that you've had. It doesn't have to be through a class. It could be through an outside organization, or within your community, whatever public speaking or something that you've done will really help you in the future. And the best thing to learn is just to learn how to market yourself. You don't have to have all of your experiences through a job or through an internship, or just some particular anthropology internship. You can market yourself by using any of the opportunities that you've had, and remember that you're valuable. All the experience they've had made you who you are, and that was what would make you a good candidate for some of these positions. So you don't have to only use these specific hard skills that you've learned. You can use some of your daily life activities to lend yourself to why you'd be good in these job positions as well. But I will say, for hard skills, I do a lot of georeferencing, and there's this thing called GIS, it's Geographic Information Systems. If you are interested in natural history collections, I highly suggest taking a class in that. That will be incredibly helpful for you, and it'll really give you a step up, and will open up other different job opportunities within this field.
I think too, along with the public speaking and being a good writer and having writing skills, a lost art nowadays seems to be community service skills, or interacting with the community. So if you've had a job in the food industry, highlight that I can work with the community, I can work with the public, because it's something that is no longer emphasized in a lot of resumes. And I think it's something that everybody in museums look for.
And I would say too, like, maybe you're an officer in a school club or a sorority or fraternity. If you're in charge of projects, that's project management. That's working with people, with a thing, and getting it all in place. And I think that's really important too. So you could consider those project management skills. And to Elizabeth's point, we get a lot of students who are either applying to our program and talking to us ahead of time, or they're in our program applying for internships or jobs. And they're like, oh, but I worked at the Gap for 4 years. Heck yes, put that on your resume. Retail and food service and hospitality industry, y'all have seen it. You have done it. And a good chunk of museum jobs are working with the public. You are public facing. So they need to know that you are friendly, that you're detail oriented, that you can handle different personalities, and you can handle situations you're problem solvers. So definitely include that. We certainly do not look down on anybody who includes that, because at some point you have to eat too. Let's be super honest. You might take an unpaid internship in the field for something that, to get the experience of what you want to do, but you also have to pay your bills. And we are really 100% understanding of that.
I do want to add on one other thing related to what all of my colleagues here have been talking about, which is that when you're looking at these positions, make sure to spend a little bit of time to tailor your resume to match some of the vocabulary that is in these job postings. A lot of times there are a lot of people that are applying to these different roles. And it's not, for example, if someone were applying to be working in my department, I'm actually not the first person always to look at them. It will go to human resources on occasion, and they're not paleontologists. Their specialties in human resources. And so sometimes certain institutions, this happens all throughout the job sector, will use these programs that kind of look and see how much verbiage is matching, and we'll give it a score. And sometimes those are the people that go forward. So just make sure that some of that language is definitely repeated both in your resume and cover letter. And it's okay to be repeating the vocabulary. You're showing that you've either done something or done something similar, but make sure you are doing that, because for example, my position, when I first applied, like 100 people had applied for it. But because I had included some of that language, I actually got this like higher percentage score of matching it. And so I did go to the next round. So that's just one of those tips that no one really teaches you until you've gone through it. So definitely do that.
Okay, everyone. So we probably have time for about one-ish more question before the end of the Zoom meeting. Does anybody have a question that we, have managed to completely skip over?
If there's no questions in the chat, any new questions? Okay, yeah. And what I was going to ask is similar to your question, Marie. So thank you for asking that. What does kind of the day-to-day look like in your various positions? And kind of on top of that, I feel like what are things that you did not realize when you started in this field, but that are like the biggest, that's like a big challenge in this position? That maybe was unexpected, as well as something that's very rewarding that you also maybe didn't expect. So kind of maybe a glimpse into the day-to-day that people may not realize, and then one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest rewards that maybe you didn't realize initially going into this field. And we'll end with that.
I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat. What was important for me throughout my career process is transparency. And what's important for our institution, but all other institutions, is you're creating these workflows and that you're sharing them with your colleagues so that other people want to do the same processes that you do, have the opportunity to do that. So I maintain this GitHub page, which essentially just details a lot of the different work that I will do on a day-to-day basis. You'll see the workflows within the sections, but there's also a lot of different things talking about our relational database and all of those other things as well. Let me just drop it in the chat before I forget. And I think I was surprised by, or what I was most concerned about when I first started working at a museum is being able to identify fossils. So I learned a lot in my zooarchaeology courses, but now that I used to work on vertebrates and now I work on invertebrates, and I was very concerned that I wouldn't be able to do that. And there are so many resources out there. Having the opportunity to learn how to use scientific publications and disseminate them and just really to break down what it means is going to be a really helpful skill that you have. So if you want to contact your library resources and kind of learn some of those skills. That's really helpful. But that was what was the absolute most daunting thing to me. I feel like my role is academic adjacent. So I know a lot about science. I learn a lot through scientific publications and I do a lot of that work, but that's not my main focus per se. So that was always rather daunting for me coming out of my undergraduate degree, was understanding, like, can I do the science if I don't have my graduate degree? And you absolutely can. Every day I learn a lot. So you just have to be dedicated and doing essentially a lot of reading and meeting people and going to people's presentations they have. If there are any graduate students that are presenting their research, you have the opportunity to see them present and learn what they do. That'll be really helpful as well.
I think a big challenge that I didn't expect coming into this field was that the pressure of representing the museum. And in my situation, I'm not only representing the museum, but also the Department of Anthropology and the University of California. And so I think, kind of in line with all of what all of our colleagues have said here, is maintaining professionalism, demonstrating in your resume that you have customer service skills, that you can communicate with the public, that you can be appropriate, especially nowadays that nomenclature has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years. Just to, I think, emphasize that you have that level of professionalism and that you can maintain that in your career with all of your communications. I think that was probably the biggest challenge for me. I started my career when I was 21. And so I've been here for a little while. And I think it was a very, very difficult challenge to be faced with as a young adult, to know that everything that I say in any communication, be it verbal or written, is on the record, and it is something that will represent my institution. So just something to keep in mind, but not scary.
In my day-to-day work at the museum, the biggest challenge is really just multitasking. There is always going to be more work to do. There are always more objects to catalog. The database always can use improvements. There's always another exhibition coming around the corner. So there's shipping to coordinate, budgets, invoices to double check. So it's perhaps not quite as interesting as working with fossils, but working with the various art objects that are in the museum's collection is my favorite part of the day. So I do try to allot at least a few hours to step away from my desk and actually work with these objects that got me interested in working in museums in the first place. And if you ever see folks working on the egghead sculptures on campus, say hi, because that's probably me going around and cleaning them.
Randy, I know you don't strictly work in a museum, but do you want to say anything about you love your job?
I do. I love meeting prospective students, and I really like working with our current students. We try to be a really small, we're designed to be a small program, and that way everybody has kind of a cohort feel, and we do several food days during the semester to lure people in to come to our office. And we have a student area where students can come in and work on their assignments or print their readings out for free, which would save a ton of money. We did care packages, and I delivered those to everybody's houses during COVID since we couldn't all get together. So yeah, I like it. And we have some really amazing well-known museums on our campus, including the Natural History Museum and Biodiversity Institute. Some of their claims to fame are their vertebrate paleontology and their herpetology collections. And going back behind the scenes, we have our affiliate faculty who work over there, and I just have some friends that work over there too. So anytime I can go behind the scenes and see what's in their collections that aren't out to the public, their holotypes and things like that. It's exciting. I kind of nerd out. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have one of these. So yeah, I learn something new every day, even though I'm kind of museum field adjacent.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to Nora for organizing this for our office, one of our wonderful peer advisors, and to the panelists who took time out of their schedules to join us. And for those who remain on the chat on the Zoom, I also just want to mention that, feel free to reach out to any of our panelists for potentially doing like an informational interview with them. 20 to 30 minutes, maybe a Zoom call where you can ask more about, because we didn't have time, here to have them share in depth of, okay, what does an average day look like for them? But in an informational interview, that's part of the hope of doing something like that. I encourage all undergrads to be doing those, basically talking to professionals like we have today in their field about, what the day-to-day looks like and what they like most about their job, what they like least, like really getting the full spectrum to learn more. And hopefully, obviously, a lot of insights have been shared here today, but I feel like this is just kind of a taste of learning that info. So we'll send out, Nora can compile an email to y'all with the contact info for everyone here today. And maybe also some of the resources that were put in the chat, some of the professional associations that can be compiled in an email. But I'm just glad to see so many folks here. Hopefully this was helpful in learning more about these kinds of careers. So I guess, Nora, if you want to stop the recording, we'll end it there. And thanks everyone for being